Welcome. The following video offers an interpretation of some aspects of the recent film The Menu with regard to how this peculiar encounter of seemingly opposite worlds bears witness to the present state and zeitgeist of Western cultures. Here, the crème de la crème of late capitalism, i.e. people who can afford this expensive and prestigious event, meets a community which, although it seems to be based on voluntary employment, bears the features of a veritable sect. This is an autonomous microcosmos cut off from the outside world, utterly hierarchized, where every aspect of its members' lives serves the goal of preparing the flawless exertion of a highly sophisticated ceremony. Hence, what this place can be said to represent is a self-chosen unfreedom, namely devotion of one's energies to perfection. But why does the elite of society, whose liberal economy is supported by a Western ideal of freedom and personal responsibility and a neoliberal lifestyle, pay horrendous amounts of money to get immersed in a spectacle brought about by the aforementioned structure? In the context of this question, it is first of all instructive to point out how consumers and service providers are alike here, namely to the extent that the aforementioned societal elite can be assumed to adhere to neoliberal and/or humanist ideals of self-optimization, to curate the perfect Instagram channel, for instance, to keep oneself healthy, slim and sporty, to have the most efficient and productive work routine possible, and so on. One aspect of which has been analyzed by Michel Foucault as biopolitics. In this sense, I believe that my previous formulation regarding how the secular religiosity of Chef's team manifests itself, a self-chosen unfreedom, namely devotion of one's energy to perfection, can be applied to his guests as well. This hypothesized likeness can be taken as a starting point for possible explanations of the fascination with Chef and his sect, one of them being that the latter implicitly represent to their clients a non-ambiguous quasi-religious devotion to perfection, an ideal which on the one hand is vital to the neoliberal lifestyle, but on the other hand, as it were, undermined by the injunction to enjoy, a notion coined by mid-20th century French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, that is inextricable from nowadays consumerism. Furthermore, a Lacanian reading of the peculiar situation that this film depicts suggests two potential explanations of the aforementioned fascination. The first one being that the closed system run by Chef allows his clients to unconsciously regard its members as living in a state of wholeness, of non-contradictory existence, a fantasy that haunts every human being as soon as it enters the symbolic realm. This is an observation which plays an important role in Lacan's theoretical considerations, for instance with regard to his concepts of das Ding and of the male formula of sexuation. Another Lacanian concept which proves helpful here is that of interpassivity. This term denotes, among other things, the phenomenon that we can obtain pleasure from merely watching others do something pleasurable. And if we assume that, as previously elaborated, what appears to be a non-ambiguous self-sacrificial devotion to quasi-spiritual cause, i.e. the creation of the flawless artwork, guiding all the cook's actions and leaving no room for indecision or inner conflict, is at the same time something the clients unconsciously long for, then we can conclude that the insights the clients get into Chef's team's lives and work are in themselves pleasurable to the former. Which brings me to another group of concepts, this time not by Lacan, which have had some influence in 20th and 21st century humanities, namely those of Orientalism, Africanism, etc. Inaugurated by literary theorist Edward Said, this approach deals with the habit that Europeans have long had, and still have, of generating stereotypical, inaccurate representations of economically less developed cultures, which enable them to fantasize about a more unspoiled spiritual and sensual life offered by an exotic culture. Akin to this is the notion of the noble wild, which is equally deep-rooted in the European history of ideas and similarly could be said to boil down to bourgeois Europeans desiring features of more primitive, more materially and/or culturally and religiously constrained figures. Even Chef himself, this embodiment of the Western values of artistic genius, cultural refinement, and discipline, has a secret affection for the culture of the simple people, which turns out to be his decisive Achilles heel, leading to the movie's final plot twist. Additionally, the way the story is told all too obviously endeavors to direct the spectator's sympathies towards the one lower-class girl as the only unspoiled, approachable person on the island. Hence, the previously theorized phenomena could be seen as analogous to the one we see in the menu and accordingly be accounted for with the latter two Lacanian concepts as well. But beyond these rather psychological speculations, the scenario which is depicted in the menu can also be seen as indicative of a rather recent development of capitalism, namely that today buying experiences has become more important than it used to be, and correspondingly amassing goods isn't the primary status symbol anymore. Lately, borrowing has become more and more prevalent, be it cars, streaming platforms, or an experience, a location, a vibe, as is the case here, since what Chef's team in the menu gets paid for is strictly temporary. They offer a Gesamtkunstwerk that you cannot buy to hang on your wall, enjoyment that you cannot reproduce at home. Finally, I would like to consider the scene in which one of the cooks, after having announced that in spite of his promise and his efforts, he will never be as good at his profession as chef, shoots himself in front of everyone. The scenario has obviously been planned, and the clients react with indignation. However, this staged suicide in all its cynicism could be regarded as shedding a critical light on certain features of Western culture. Most obviously, perhaps, the cook's statement preceding his suicide, namely that he will never be good as the chef, could be regarded as a caricature of the competitive mindset that more or less subtly governs many areas of life in more or less neoliberal societies. Secondly, the fact that the suicide is staged reminds of the various ways in which our taste for watching people fail spectacularly or dramatically is made a source of financial profit in our societies, be it in boulevard press, in magazines, in television, on YouTube, on social media, or elsewhere. And lastly, it may be worthwhile to compare the cynicism of Chef's approval of his student's suicide with the foundational doctrine of the Calvinist work ethic, which has been of central importance for the development of nowadays liberal economies. Because the latter combines, in a manner which has proven to be no less effective than it too is cynical, the doctrine that, to put it in the suicidal cook's words, some will never be good as others, with the belief that God would still grant one the success one might be predestined to have at any given moment, but only if one keeps trying incessantly in spite of any potentially discouraging reality one might be confronted with. Consequently, Calvinist work ethic prompts everyone to keep working hard by keeping alive the absurd hope that, however grave the actual economic, epistemic, etc. inequalities, everyone can at any given moment still be rewarded for its effort with a God-given success.